Okay. Okay, Cuyahoga County Public Works Procurement and Contracting Committee meeting for Wednesday, March the 6th, 2019 will be called to order. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Miller, Ms. Conwell,
Here.
Mr. Schrein,
Here.
Ms. Baker. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Gallagher is in attendance.
Okay, welcome, Councilman. Is there any public comment this morning?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Okay, seeing none, could I have approval of the minutes from the February 6, 2019 meeting?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the ayes have it. And Madam Clerk, if we could have the first matter referred to committee, and we are going at the request of some folks a little bit out of order here, so.
Resolution number 2019-0048, authorizing an amendment to a revenue-generating agreement with United Cerebral Palsy Association of Greater Cleveland for lease of office space at the Green Road Services Center.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record, please.
From the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities. I'm here today to talk about an amendment to a lease between the county and United Cerebral Palsy of Greater Cleveland on behalf of the Board of Developmental Disabilities. This amendment is for approximately 3,200 square feet at the board's Green Road facility. What occurs there is programming, adult programming for approximately 30 to 35 individuals that obviously have developmental disabilities, but are also multi-handicapped. In other words, they are in wheelchairs, need changing tables, etc. This amendment, what is unique about this amendment, it only goes for 8 months. And the rationale behind that is that as of December 31st of this year, I already alluded to in other presentations, the Board of DD has to get out of the provider business. So we're going to have 8 adult training centers that we're going to be leasing out to private providers. And we've come up with a rental rate for those. So we're going to try to coordinate and make sure that any other space we rent comes in line with those rates that private providers are going to pay in our adult training centers. So that's the reason it's only short term. Just a history, this building was exclusively built, operated, maintained with County Board of DD funds since the mid-70s. We cannot own the building. The county has to own the building. That's why I have to ask your permission. Plus the lease is under fair market value for $1. As I said, this was a school up until the late 90s. However, the laws changed and the children that we were serving at those schools are now served by their local facilities. As far as this facility right now, we use part of the space for administrative offices for a few of our behavioral health, our OTPTs. In addition, the bulk of the space is used by Head Start programs run by greater opportunities for economic opportunities of Greater Cleveland, and then the UCP. So the building is pretty much utilized, and we would continue to have UCP utilize this space for the next 8 months. Hopefully, they'll be willing to pay a little higher rate and renew the lease, or go into a new lease, I should say, as of January 1st.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, any questions from members of the committee? Pretty self-explanatory. And we're looking to move this along when?
Well, I think this actually goes into effect May 1st, so I think we should
be okay doing
Yeah,
full
we should
3
be
readings.
okay.
Okay, then I'll have a motion.
I'll move.
Okay, to move this on to second reading. A motion and a second for second reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2019-0060, authorizing the vacation of a certain portion of Warrensville Center Road located in the city of Shaker Heights.
Okay, and for my colleagues on the committee here, they're going a little bit out of order, so it's the second last item on the sheet here on page 2. Okay, if you could just state your name for the record, please.
Dave Marquardt from the Department of Public Works, and Neil Junkie is with me from the Department of Public Works tax map operations.
Okay.
This is a vacation request for a very small corner of Warrensville Center Road right away. The vacation of this very small piece of land really has no impact on the use of the roadway at all. The request came from Shaker Heights to vacate this portion if possible. We looked at it, we decided that it could be vacated and that it gets vacated back to the adjoining parcel owners. The legislation proposed today defines the vacation process, which includes a schedule of council approvals, site viewings, and final hearing, along with public notification within that schedule. We have given you a copy, handed out a copy, and I apologize for it being at the last minute, that shows the dates and the schedule that has to take place to follow the Ohio Revised Code process for vacating a piece of right-of-way. Neil is here. He has a presentation prepared that will help show where this is occurring and show the impact of what the vacation will accomplish. So go ahead, Neil.
Good morning. Is it going to show up on the screen somewhere? There we go.
Okay.
So right here is what used to be the right turn lane heading east on Chagrin Road, and then heading south onto Warrensville. It is this piece that we want to vacate. It has already been improved as part of the Shaker Heights project for this whole area here, and I'm just going to show you what the change was if you just look at the aerial photo. And that's where the new sidewalk is. This is the current roadway right-of-way. They want to change that so that it now comes out to this over here, vacating that as part of the road and giving this property to this owner of this parcel here, which is a Wendy's. So they're going to do some improvements on their property once they acquire that property. So it is just a small portion that's being vacated. Any questions?
Yeah, just, so it's the city of Shaker Heights that is making the request, not the Wendy's
Yes, we
individual?
received a letter from the city requesting.
Okay. Okay, any questions from my colleagues? Mr. Strawn?
But the property is going to be owned by private owner, or is it going to be owned by the Shaker Heights?
Or no,
When vacated.
private owner, yes.
Okay, so that's going to then go into the taxable rolls, that
That's
little piece?
correct.
So we're
Yes,
going
So
to,
their property will be reappraised and hopefully bring in some more income.
yeah, okay, so
Yes.
it's a win for us as far as collecting some
It's a
additional
win
tax
for
revenue.
everybody, yeah,
Well,
I think so.
the taxpayer would have liked it to maybe stay tax-free, but that's all right. If it stays as a,
Except for that, right.
as it stays a public entity, but it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right, any other questions? Seems pretty straightforward here, so, and then with that, I'm trying to follow your time outline, so next you want second reading suspension? Is that what you're looking at? To try to keep up with your timeline?
Yes, I believe we're requesting a second reading suspension.
Okay, I'll make that motion. Could I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for second reading suspension. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, opposed nay. Ayes have it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, item number 3, which is the last on the agenda here.
Ordinance number 2019-0003, amending Chapter 501 of the Cuyahoga County Code to change the contracts and purchasing procedures.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Mike Chambers, Public Works. Before I start my presentation, I was wondering if I can have Dave Wondolowski, the building trades, address you guys.
Sure. Yeah.
If I may, and I'll need the committee to do this, there is a proposed substitute
Okay.
regarding this ordinance. and we would need to pass that first to discuss it. It's section 501.10 of the ordinance needs to be corrected. The change should be not to exceed $1,000 versus the proposed $5,000 in this particular section. Per the fiscal office vouchers can only be used for purchases not to exceed $1,000. We can't make purchases on office vouchers above $1,000 according to the state auditors. The error is corrected with this proposed substitute to get in line with what both the fiscal office and the state auditors are telling us what we can do.
Okay.
I'll support my colleague's request for this amendment, just to get it on for discussion purposes. So move.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second to.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, who
sorry.
made the second?
Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second to accept the proposed substitute. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Okay, and then we have Mr. Wondolowski. I'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, first of all, good morning, and thanks for having me here this morning. We do support the change in the legislation. We have a lot of talented men and women, about, I think, in and around 70 or 75 skilled building trades men and women that work for you already. The current legislation, the way it's written, is cumbersome, and all it does is hold back the progress of our folks down here because of the nature of how you purchase things here in the county. So we support the change in the legislation, and hopefully it happens quickly because it's going to allow for the constant log jams to be removed and more work to be accomplished. So thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wondolowski. Mr. Chambers, you'd like to present before us?
I do. I have a short presentation, respectful of the time. Prior to beginning, I'd like to thank the Office of Innovation, OPD, Public Safety, HHS. They all gave me some input into their roles.
Okay.
So I just want to start with the presentation. Just a quick overview. You guys are familiar with this. We're about 1.5 billion, 7,751 employees. This is based on the 18-19 biannual budget. Public Works is in 42 communities, and mainly that's our sanitary. Of those 42 communities, we're collecting about $25 million a year of those communities' monies to be doing work in their communities. 26 buildings, 4 million square feet. On that, we're basically allocating $35 million worth of operational expenses to those 26 buildings on an annual basis. We're in 22 miles, 210 structures. That's our road and bridge section. Once again, we're collecting about $30 million a year in revenues to meet those needs. We operate 63 pump stations, 2 wastewater treatment plants, 3,300 miles of sewer, and we have 500 vehicles and hundreds of pieces of equipment. All said and done, on an annual basis, we're expending about $110 to $120 million, obviously including payroll, but that includes everything. This is the current overview. You're all familiar with this. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. The next slide basically is what we're proposing. Obviously, no change to the greater than $500,000. What we're proposing now is to increase between $1,000 and $500,000. Originally, that was the $500 if you look at the previous page. Now we replaced that with $1,000. And between $1,000 and $5,000 is what we're going to notify or call prior approval. So the departments will have the ability to go ahead and authorize that, and will still, for reporting, present that on the Board of Control, or until a later time when the ERP can generate a different type of report that'll satisfy the council's needs and the administration's needs. Between $5,000 and $50,000 will be the informal process, where we have to go out and solicit the 3 bids and try and make the multiple attempts. And then obviously above $50,000 is the formal bid process, which used to be at $25,000. So the only other change is at the bottom, as Councilman Gallagher indicated, that we're going to keep the voucher at $1,000. That was at $500. I attached the word form there at the end. There's still a discussion on the campaign contribution form that has to get completed. So anybody that's spending above $500 will still have to have a form signed by the vendor that they're in compliance with that. On the Board of Control items, that'll all be built into our language on the paperwork that we'll be sending out. I'll continue on. If you have any questions anytime, please feel free. Once again, comparison to other counties, they're all capped at 50,000. That's the limit. And at the very bottom of that page, you'll see the state code, House Bill 509 back in 2012, raised that to $50,000. A few of them do have minimums, like us, Franklin, Summit, Montgomery. They're at the $5,000 voucher. The other ones, Hamilton, Lucas, Stark, Hocking, we made calls between both my office and Innovation. Those ones can go right up to the $50,000. Obviously, they have their own internal controls about, getting bids and things like that. But the whole point I'm trying to show is each and every one of them have been capped at 50,000 for quite some time, which is, once again, the state, state term. Just a quick 1-2 on some of our communities. Westlake's at 50. Fairview Park is at 50, but they've went ahead and they internally keep it at 15,000. Olmsted Township always had the ability to do 3,000, and obviously City of Cleveland has up to $50,000 as well, which is, once again, the state, with the state guidelines. When we get into this next part here, the benefits of the new thresholds, once again, increase in productivity, decrease in downtime. As far as the productivity, it's our maintenance workforce going in there, getting things done, getting in and out of there, taking care of the needs. Once again, anything over $500 has to come before the Board of Control, and in all honesty, it takes 3 weeks to get to that point. A week of prep time to get on an agenda, a week before that for our team to get the quotes. It takes a lot of time, a lot of delays, and we are fortunate enough, we do have, the emergency provisions, time sensitive. We can't just bring those things every single day. Downtime. On any given basis, there's a sanitary vehicle sitting in that shop waiting for parts. On an average basis, those vehicles bill at $300 an hour. So on an annual basis, this is a low estimate, but I took the downtime of all of our POs and multiplied it, because usually we're waiting 5 days, and that's even low. And I come up with a total of about $136,000 on the low end of lost revenue. That's waiting 5 days to get parts after everything's been okayed. Forget about the couple of weeks prior to that we were waiting on parts. We do have the ability to do factory authorized, and we have taken advantage of that. But when you do factory authorized, you're going to the factory dealer, and we all know that's a little bit more expensive at times. We certainly want to do that with all of our warranty. You want to make sure we don't, void any warranties. But once the vehicle gets out of the warranty period, there is opportunity to save money and not always use the factory dealer. However, over the last couple of years, we've had to utilize factory dealers so we can get these parts back out quicker into service. Once again, at probably a more expensive cost to the county. So that's something that we could, decrease that downtime, increase that turnaround of the vehicles. Reducing, capital projects. I have an example where we went out to bid for the jail renovation. We started this thing in September. I finally had to do a justification before the board in December. It went out, there was no bids. We went out again, no bids. Then we tried to basically split it and go into two $25,000, and that didn't work. And the total was $38,000. Our trades were sitting idle. I mean, they were doing other work in between, but that delayed that project. That's just one example that happens on a regular basis because of that cap of $25,000. In addition to that, going back to improving workforce efficiency and morale, just as Dave Wanlowski indicated, our trades are constantly being compared to the outside. How much does it cost to do the outside? How much would a contractor cost? Well, when they got to sit around, wait for the parts, the delays, I mean, that kills their morale. They're frustrated. And we invited Councilman Gallagher to one of the meetings. I hear the brunt of it. You're handcuffing us. Why are we waiting on this? It's crazy. $500. Why can't I get the tools we need to work the materials we need now? And I'm telling them, well, this is the county way. And I think for 5-6 years now, I've been trying to fight to change this. And this is going to help them hugely in their morale. In addition to that, Public Works, now we've undertaken this massive master contract, and I believe it's $3.5 million. We're trying to do $3.5 million of master contracts to, in addition to increasing these thresholds, to help give our trades the flexibility to get material much more timely, than we're getting it right now. And that's the first time ever we've done that big of a contract for a bunch of different vendors and different services. So I think that's going to really improve morale, and I think you're going to see a lot more work getting done. I think it's going to improve competition. There's quite a few people, when we go out and buy speed now, you go out, you get 25 bids go out, 2 responses. I think people are, you know, in all honesty, you know, you can ask why they didn't get it, but I have a funny feeling that people don't want to bid anymore. Small businesses, it's very complicated to fill out that paperwork that we have on items over 25,000. A lot of businesses don't need our business, but we could certainly use them because they have the stuff in stock. So, you know, that's the other thing, more opportunity for small businesses. I can go on, but I'm going to keep it short, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. I mean, by raising these thresholds, it's going to give us a lot more opportunity. I think it's going to ultimately save us money. On this next page here, 64% of all the DOs that we did in the county were between $550 and $5,000. What I indicated here, and it's, once again, it's very low. I took internally what I estimated the cost Public Works was anywhere between $76 and $244 to process one DO. Catherine from Innovations came up with 6 hours and 5 minutes on a high end of county time being designated to processing a DO, and 4 hours and 28 minutes on a low. Her numbers would come out, if you take a $20 an hour, between $135,000 and $163,000 a year of efficiency gains. Doesn't mean we're going to lose staff, but we're going to certainly get a lot more done with the staff that we have. So the numbers I'm sharing with you here now are my estimate, which I do want to believe are low, because some DOs are very complicated, take a lot more. Some go a little quicker, but on average, this is what we're talking about. So these thresholds, these changes are very good for the county. I know I got HHS, I got public safety, the sheriff. You know, we're all very highly in support of this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You indicate that it's been a problem for a number of years. Why did it take so long to be brought to the forefront?
I'll be honest with you, I had a conversation many years ago about maybe raising it from, you know, it used to be at $1,000 and it got dropped down to $500. And I had a conversation, I think with Council Miller about 4 years ago about, you know, talking about it. I know Catherine got involved because the county executive in one of our meetings, we voiced concern. He had Earl take the lead, and he designated Catherine to start going through and researching all these steps. You know, that's where she came up with the 75 or the 6 hours of, you know, county time involved. It's just you know, it's been voiced for many years. I know I have voiced it for many years, and it just seems to have died, and I can't tell you why.
Okay, I'd like to hear from my colleagues on this, and you know, I'll start with Councilman Gallagher, if you guys don't mind, because I know he brought this to my attention, and he has seems to be in support of this, and I'd like to hear why, his rationale why.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is true. This is a situation, since our inception, we've heard about this, and we were going to correct it, and we never really got to it. I don't know if it was, you know, we just weren't hearing clearly, but things started happening to the point where it became obvious to me that we had to make some sort of a move. And I'll tell you, I'll share with you the story of how we got here. As I was called over to a meeting over at the Justice Center, and as concerned as we are regarding the jail and how sensitive the situation is over there with overcrowding, I was brought in and confronted by the trades guys over there in the jail kitchen itself that was being transformed to a dormitory style, which will provide us with many more beds that are needed in the facility, which is hard to come by when you're built out. And I will say things that he can't say. The gentleman who was running the jail at the time and was basically using the fact that material was not on site to justify going to the executive to bring outside independent contractors in because, quote unquote, they could get the job done. The reason the job wasn't getting done was the material wasn't there. The reason material wasn't there was because of the hamstring that we put on them. And they were out doing other jobs, but the job we needed them to do was the kitchen job. And it was being held over their heads to, in essence, in my opinion, get them out of there, to bring somebody else in. Now, whether that's nefarious or not, I don't know, but it was unfair. I did take that concern to the executive, who was unaware of that, and I made it very clear to him, and that was back in, I think, October, November, somewhere around there. It was cold. And at which point in time, I thought and think he did understand. had I not done that, who knows what that individual that was running the jail would have been able to accomplish without this. We wouldn't have gotten there without this. They would have had the material, they would have access to it, and we could have easily moved forward. So this is really something I think we needed to do. We just haven't done it. And I think we as legislators need to listen to not only our constituents, but those that are out there making us look good, the men and women on the roads and in the buildings that not only build them, but clean them. They're the ones that make us look good, and they're telling us clearly this has to be done. So I would greatly appreciate moving this forward to provide them with the materials to do the jobs in which we request that they do.
Okay, thank you, Councilman, for your comments. I think Mr. Schwan and then Mr. Miller and then Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You indicated that we had some lack of participation from vendors, I think. At least I thought I heard you indicate on bidding and projects and things of that
I
nature.
personally believe that, because when you go out and buy speed, I don't know all the reasons why. I can only assume sometimes I hear from our men and women saying that people don't want to bid on our stuff, but when you go out to bid, you'll see sometimes it goes out to everybody registered. Could be 30 people registered. Sometimes you're only getting 2 bids, 3 bids. Sometimes you get 4 or 5, but a lot of times you're not getting, a bunch of people responding. And then questions is why, and our trades and people are telling us because they don't want to do business with us. I'm not the one actually talking to them. I'm telling you the hearsay that I'm hearing.
Any concerns of the reverse auction bidding process that we instituted in the last couple of years?
I haven't gotten nothing on that, or plus or I have no comment on that. I don't know. Nothing was brought to me on that yet.
I just, when you read the literature, reverse auctions only are temporarily good things to reduce costs. In the long run, they do dissuade people from wanting to bid. They say this item's going to go to at some point to a reverse auction. I'm not sure I want to be a party to that long term. I got another place to spend my time and energy. There's only so much time. Why do I want to be in the middle of that kind of a process? So I just ask whether or not you have any awareness of that. The other thing that having spent a number of years in the Defense Department, a lot of this procurement costs are reflective of every organization and what it costs to issue a PO, to issue anything like that nature. A lot of organizations have gone to credit cards. Yeah. And the credit card is so much more efficient way of getting small purchases. And instead of being a 6-hour transaction, it becomes a 6-minute transaction. Assuming you have enough oversight of what's going on, the cost of reducing this and speeding the whole process up moves at a lightning pace. I know the federal government has gone all the way up to $100,000 with credit card purchases and transactions. Now, granted, it's a different dollar number, different organization, but the point being that they have said that this really streamlines to expedite the process so that if things need to be procured and the person has authority and the person is clearly being oversighted, it can be done at even a much faster pace than issuing POs and things of that nature. Did we look at that?
In fact, I got a call from PNC about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to set up a meeting for him to come in and explain how his credit cards work. We have a key bank right now, but I figured, he called me. I just would like to hear his program on how efficiency, much like you're saying, can improve, the way we do business. There are other limitations with that campaign contribution over $500. I mean, if you're buying something on the internet, it's a little, how do you get them to sign that thing? So there's some parameters we have that maybe other businesses and other governments may not have. But I know personally, I've asked a guy, I told him I'd call him back when I got back. I'm off this week for a couple of conference, but I was going to call him next week for just a presentation on it. I think there's opportunity.
And I can also assume that some of these transactions are repetitive with the same vendor, which makes it even that much, sometimes can make it even that much easier if you have a repetitive transaction that's in these smaller dollars, and you've already gone through your process of vetting that person, that the credit card just moves the whole thing
There's
through.
definitely a lot of advantages to it.
Yeah.
And, once I go through the program, I might be in a better spot to come back and chat with them.
And I know private industry has also gone to utilizing some of the new techniques and tools. For example, the buttons at Amazon, if it's a repetitive transaction, it eliminates the purchase order altogether. And I know that that's something that we've been doing now for almost 5 years in my own personal business. And it takes and reduces that cost of PO from the dollars and the time you're talking about down to minutes again. Because it's repetitive, it gets researched, it can be oversight, nothing gets lost in the process. Assuming the person was doing the oversight in the first place, then they don't give up anything by using some of the expedited techniques that are now currently available in the private sector.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman and my colleagues, I support the legislation. It's not a radical change in the county's procurement process. It's a fair and reasonable change that'll improve efficiency. I don't think it's going to reduce council oversight. The council spends a lot of time on oversight of the administration, and that is not going to change if this legislation passes. What is going to change is that our oversight might be a little bit better prioritized to the most important contracts. So I'm comfortable with that. The one thing I want to ask about is if you could explain in a little more detail the between 1,000 and 5,000. What exactly is going to happen at the Border Control now with the items in that range?
The way it is now is that anything over $1,000, we have to have the fiscal officer has to encumber money. So the way I'm projecting it and working with Lenore is the only mechanism we have right now is running it through a DO process. So if by chance in the future the ERP can change that where we can still do it and run a report for you guys, we can. But to encumber that money, that DO process is the encumbrance of that money. So bottom line is if something costs $3,000, I'm still going to encourage my people to call around. But right now, then it won't be the formal process where you have to have everything come back and load it in the system. We'll have the ability, the department has the ability to go ahead and authorize that $3,000 on the spot. We'll then fill out the paperwork. It'll come to you on the board as already approved items or prior approved. So you'll still see what we bought. And if there's any questions or something like that, you can certainly raise them. But that's just a mechanism to encumber the money.
So it'll just be reported to the Border Control, but it won't need to be approved by the Border Control in advance.
That's my understanding how we're going to do
Right.
it, yes.
But then once you get above 5,000, then it's going to be items have to come to the Border Control and be approved in advance.
Right. I think
Okay.
it's more like the consent items are kind of sitting on the side there, and we can work that out. Here we go.
If you could please state your name for the record.
Mr. Chair, Trevor Mackler, council staff. Councilman Miller, I think to your question, under the proposed ordinance, that will not be required to come to Board of Control. So I think when the ERP is fully up and running, if there is a system that would allow them to encumber the funds, you might not see that at the Board of Control after that point. But I just wanted to be clear to make sure you understood that nothing in the proposed ordinance would require anything between 1,000 to 5,000 go to Board of Control.
So if that's the case, why is between 1,000 and 500,000 listed as Border Control? Why is that not listed as between 5,000 and 500,000?
Mr. Chair, to Councilman Miller's question, right now, due to the state auditor, everything above $1,000 has to be paid on what's called an encumbrance voucher. So every purchase above $1,000 requires an encumbrance number. And in order for, I think, to kind of simplify it, in order for the system to produce an encumbrance number, it has to go through the DO process, which would then show up on the Board of Control. But nothing, I just want to stress that nothing in the proposed ordinance would require a Board of Control approval for anything up to $5,000.
So it would not require an approval, but it would be listed on the agenda as something that was that took
Yeah.
place.
I would say that is going to be probably certainly true until the ERP is up and running. I would have to check with OPD and fiscal to see if then that would be a requirement once the new system is running, because I'm not sure of the process of how an encumbrance number would be issued under the new system. So I just wanted to make sure there's a full understanding that nothing would guarantee moving forward that purchases under 5,000 would appear on the Board of Control agenda.
Okay. My question for you, John, would it appear somewhere so there's some type of oversight? There has to be some type of oversight.
I'm certain a report could be run upon request. I don't see that as being a problem at all, and that's why I kind of put here reporting only until the ERP. I'm sure there's a report that could be generated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. I mean, a lot of that stuff could go under the radar, you know, and, you know, we like to think things work perfectly,
I
but
have
they don't
absolutely no
always,
problem.
you know.
Anytime you want, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to share it with you, but the
Yeah,
goal
so
is-
I share Councilman Miller's
So,
concern on that.
If I
so
can add.
I just want to make sure that the ordinance reads properly. It currently reads that any contract over $500 has to be approved by the Board of Control. So is that going forward, is that going to read 1,000 or is that going to read 5,000?
Councilman Miller, the proposed ordinance, sponsored by Councilman Gallagher, Schron, and Stevens, increases that $500 threshold to 5,000.
Okay, so it's 5,000.
Okay,
The $1,000 threshold comes into play related to how we can pay our vendors. The state auditor, just to restate, the state auditor requires that anything above $1,000 has to go on an encumbrance voucher versus an office voucher. And that's what the proposed substitute fixed when you first started talking about this item.
okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ms. Baker?
Thank you. The first question I have is, this is not limited just to Public Works. This is for all departments.
Correct.
And I certainly understand and makes sense your request here today as to what your issues are with the trades. But we're talking about all departments, and I don't see any other department here, I don't think, that is before us saying that they also need to have this increased.
I will, I did reach out to every one of them, and I did talk to HHS and, clothing for children, ADA chairs, car seats. I mean, I got a lot of input from them. Same thing with public safety. They're beholden to our more restrictive rules, whereas the federal guidelines are much easier, but because we have more restrictive, they're beholden to them. So, because of our procurement limits, they're stuck to this more restrictive limit, so it's gonna definitely benefit them as well. I know IT as well as, the sheriff, very similar, they buy a lot of stuff as well. So I did have a long conversation with them. I was just trying to keep this short. I didn't want to make this a long meeting. That was my fault.
Well, my concern is that it is broader than what it is being presented here, and that we're not hearing that there is a necessity for others to also need that threshold higher. Certainly understand your issues, and I think that that's probably, if it wasn't for you, we probably wouldn't be hearing about this from others. So the concentration is really with your department.
Sure.
My concern, if I may, along with that, is that as a member of the Board of Control in the last couple of years, it just seems that we are always questioning contract dates and why they're late, and the purpose and the whole protocol of the different things that are brought before us. And although I agree with your issue here, I'm really reluctant to change anything, given what I've had to work hard in Board of Control in questioning. And many times it's because state and federal grants aren't, responding in enough time, but many times it's just a lack of getting it to us on time. And that's concerning to me.
Mr. Chair, if I can provide a response, and the question was asked to Mr. Chambers a little bit ago of terms of why wasn't something brought up years ago. I can say the fiscal officer and other departments have come to council staff and has requested the threshold to be increased. Those conversations, I would say, happen quite frequently over the particularly last 4 years, particularly when our current fiscal officer came on board with his experience in all the various subdivisions. The issue at the time from the council staff perspective was getting a council member to sponsor the legislation. Council wrote the procurement code back in 2011, mainly with the help of Councilman Miller. And we just couldn't find a sponsor. This time, Public Works had discussions with Councilman Gallagher in particular from that meeting at the jail. And then we were told to, draft the legislation. So I just know from other departments, they have come to us and asked us to increase the minimum threshold of the $500. This time, I was just able to get a council member to sponsor the legislation.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Baker, anything further?
No, I'm just, like I said, I think that because it affects all departments, it may have been a good place to put this in finance rather than Public Works, and maybe that would have generated a little bit more conversation from others that are affected by this, HHS and the others that, but it does seem to be a Public Works issue, and it does seem to be a very logical request that you're asking. I would like to see it narrowed to Public Works, but I don't think that's probably gonna happen. That's my concern.
To the chair, to Councilwoman Baker, if I could just answer, I have been in discussions with Walter Parfiewicz from HHS and Michael Young from IT, talking about this specifically. It's unfortunate that they're not here today, but I think you will find out, and I'm going to encourage them to come maybe in the near future here. But I think they're going to voice their support for this going forward. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that with you. It's unfortunate they're not here today, but I think they're supportive of this item.
Mr. Chairman, as a co-sponsor of this, and someone who also runs a small business, I understand that we've got to expedite the process because it's just bogging us down in the amount of small transactional activity. It takes as long to run a small transactional activity as it does to run a bigger one, and yet it slows the whole process down. And I'm glad that, and I've heard it from other departments too, not just, you guys just happen to be the ones here taking the arrows on whether we bump this number up there, but I'm wholeheartedly encouraging this number to get bumped up there. I mean, perhaps if some of my colleagues are concerned about this, you could put a trigger into any ERP system that says, if we have hit $100,000 with this particular vendor, we want to go into a deeper dive because a bunch of $5,000 transactions perhaps would be a concern. And you could put a trigger in there that says, when you hit that, boom, you're gonna dig into it deeper if you need to. But you don't have to look at every single transaction or 50,000, whatever the number happens to be. But clearly, these repetitive transactions are the ones that bog us down the most, and they're the ones that a system like an ERP is designed purposely to expedite. And I guarantee you, we're gonna be sitting in the same room in 3 to 4 years, and we're gonna be looking at newer technologies that are gonna make it even go faster, not because we're trying to gloss over something, but because we know we need to. If you focus on the big stuff, that's where the bigger savings are, and allows you to take this little stuff off your table.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that, Mr. McAleer.
To Councilwoman Baker's concerns, I know unfortunately our fiscal officer could not be here, and I don't like representing what his opinion is, but him and I met prior to him going out on leave about this particular legislation. He, again, he brought this up when he first started here, and his name, his signature is on the DO or PO, and he's got to sign every check, and he is supportive of this legislation and agrees when he first started that the thresholds needed to be increased. Again, I don't want to speak for him because he's not here, but I wanted you to know that I did talk this proposed legislation once we drafted it over with the fiscal officer, and he didn't have any issues with it.
Okay, thank you. I think some of our, I understand the importance of doing this, and I actually support the legislation. I want to be perfectly clear about that. It's very important to remove these inefficiencies and get things done in a prompt manner. My only concern is things coming under the radar, not now, not tomorrow, but a year from now, 2 years from now, when this kind of, it becomes the norm. So my thing is I just want to make sure that these lower valued deals are that there's oversight on this, that there's some indication of here's what was paid out, and at some point, council gets something. I'm not saying it has to be a weekly report or anything like that, but at some point, maybe Board of Controllers or that group gets something indicating, these were what were bid on or paid out or what have you.
I just know, Mike Chambers again, I just know in the beginning, they'll be coming through the Board of Control, because that's the only way we have it. I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe the comfort level will start getting a little bit better. I did take the initiative on it, because I know it means the most to our department, and I did get, input from everybody else. It's obviously the bigger departments with the bigger budgets that this isn't gonna impact the most, like county treasurer, I mean, it's a minimal down there,
Right,
so.
and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not too concerned with Public Works. Yeah. I mean, that's not really where I'm concerned about this, because you guys you do a great job.
Right, and
But
going
there
back
are
to-
other departments that,
No,
you
I'm
know,
with you.
I am concerned about.
And as the presentation shows, I mean, we're the second largest county, and we're below townships, so
Sure.
inefficiency
Sure.
is, this is ripe with that.
Sure, no, it makes.
I respect everything you've said, but I
Makes
think this
sense.
is best.
Makes total sense. Ms. Conwell has a comment?
Through the chair to Mr. Chambers, I agree with Councilman Tuma about the oversight, and I've been one of the main ones to talk about oversight. So I am concerned about HHS. It's a large department, and other departments being able to spend this money. Is there any way to amend this legislation now to talk about the reporting requirements, that maybe it should go to not Board of Control as an official, but make sure that the reports are going every week to Board of Control so they can see it and view the council members that are sitting on that?
I'll be honest with you, I can't speak for the ERP and what's gonna be built out to it, but I gotta assume there's technology there that they can run a report from plus to this and this, and I certainly think a council request to OPD, or I'll be happy to give you ours once I get the reports. I don't think it's gonna be a difficult thing to do.
Is it a problem letting the system stay like it is until the ERP is done?
I mean, you heard from Dave Wondolowski, our trades, yeah, it really is. I mean, you handcuff these good men and women out there.
Yeah,
It really does.
ERP could be.
Yeah, and, I mean, I've got legislation coming for Board of Control on Monday that this would replace if, you'll see it on Monday, but.
Right.
And I understand all that. I just want some kind of definite from your department, or Kennedy, since he'll be speaking for probably all the departments, of how we're gonna maintain, if we go forward with this on the oversight, and how we're gonna have that information.
Councilwoman Conwell, if there's a desire by the committee to mandate that requirement, I then would certainly put it in the legislation. I know just from history, we originally had something very similar in the procurement code related to contracts, reporting to council from every contract approved at the Board of Control. I don't know if you remember that, but once a month, it would increase the agenda packet.
But I'm requesting that this get reported to the Board of Control, to the BOC.
No, I know, but council actually took that part out because it was really repeating what was on the Board of Control as a report to council. I'm a little concerned if we do mandate it and require it every week, the efficiency that we're hoping on saving might go away in terms of just OPD staff, then trying to get everything in, taking every PO and putting that into a table to neatly present that at a Board of Control agenda. But that is up to the committee. But if that's something that the committee would want to do, I think you should require it in the ordinance. I just don't know if that's what you want to make that as a mandate, to make OPD do that on a weekly basis.
Well, I don't know how other people feel, but I think there should be some sort of, something in the legislation in terms of oversight and how this money is gonna be utilized in all departments.
Mr. Chair.
What the frequency is.
Yeah.
We
If
can
I can
talk
add,
about that.
right now, $0 to $499.99, there's no requirement or that, in terms of reporting. So the proposed ordinance would just increase that threshold. So right now, everything below $500, we can ask about, we don't require any type of reporting requirement. And that's a lot of purchases. I don't know, we don't have that stat, but most of our purchases in terms of pure volume probably fall under $500, between office supply orders from every department every other day. But that's something that they could provide. Like, we can say, can you give us every WB Mason order, which is our office supply company? They can, we haven't, but they could probably run that report for us.
Okay, Ms. Conwell.
Do we have anything now where they can show us how much across all these departments that they've ran into these issues? I mean, we hear from Public Works today, but is there any kind of way that they can show us?
In terms of the discussions that I've had with the departments, it's more about saving time. I think similar to what Public Works have seen, when it has to go to a Board of Control agenda, it more than likely at least increases the time of that purchase by about 3 weeks. So if you get everything in the system, OPD signs off on it, you get approval, before it hits an available agenda, it probably, I would say, at the least amount, takes 3 additional weeks. And so in terms of efficiency from, I think, what Councilman Gallagher and the other sponsors were trying to do there was at least shave off the 3-week requirement for the 3-week additional time. That doesn't include all the time leading up to getting the okay to purchase it before it even hits a Board of Control agenda. So I think in terms of efficiencies or problems that this would solve, it would really help departments shave off that window from once they have everything in order to complete the purchase to the point of getting approved to actually complete that purchase at the Board of Control.
Okay, just throwing something out to my colleagues, what if we put something out there, if we did legislate further, upon request of council, a written report upon request of council, that if there's any concerns by anybody, that way there could be something provided. It's not something that's required every week or every month, but if something arises or something's brought to somebody's attention. Ms. Baker?
If I may comment on that, the problem with that is that you just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know to ask because you don't have anything that is in front of you to question. So that's the problem with that.
Okay. Mr. Schrein, then Mr. Miller.
There's some basic comments in business that you talk about the 80-20 rule as far as what takes up 80% of your time and what is producing 20% of your big picture items. Can I just make a guess that between the zero and the new limit, that's probably taking up more than 80% of your administrative time to do those transactions?
Based on my slide, it was 64% of what we did, so.
Okay, so we're close. All right, 64% of your time is taking up in that bulk, of which is taking 3 weeks and sometimes 6 hours for a purchase order. Did that take into consideration the 500?
Yeah, well, no, that's.
I'd be willing to bet, I bet my number's
90.
closer to yours, huh?
Yeah.
It's over 90? If you,
No, there's a lot on,
well, your 64, I thought was from 500 to 1,000,
It
to the new limit.
Right.
You take it down from 0 to 500, I'll bet you what we've done is because we're working with limited number of staff and we're gonna get less staff, we're gonna do more, and it's gonna allow you to free up, instead of those 6 hours being spent doing that administrative, you've got 6 hours to spend on the big picture items. And I can only think that you do more good by looking at a $2 million or $5 million or $10 million contract and saving us 1 or 2% than you do by what you could save on these transactions and the worry as far as that. I'm sure that we'll be able to electronically be able to do that. And this frees up 3 weeks for every one of those times and 6 hours for every one of those POs that you now have. We've actually, if we do this, we're granting you all this much more time. My request will be, save us money on the big number items, on the $1 million transactions, because you're going to have that much more opportunity to do those kind of transactional activities and savings and oversight and responsibilities where the big bucks are.
I agree, and like I told you, any of the numbers I mentioned were probably way low. I didn't want to, it's hard to imagine all those hours putting in. Exactly, I agree.
Money you could be saving for us by taking this burden off you and putting your focus on the big construction items, the big projects, and whether it's your department or procurement, whether they're buying copy paper in a 3-year annual contract or 2-year annual contract, that's where we could actually be saving the big transactional dollars, it seems to me. So,
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Miller and then Ms. Conwell.
I am comfortable with raising the limit on no reporting up to 1,000, saying that that's in the purchase order range. But I agree with Ms. Conwell and Ms. Baker, once we get over 1,000, that it should be reported in the Board of Control. It's, looking at the Board of Control agenda, you're looking at no more than 5 to 10 contracts a week that fall in that $1,000 to $5,000 range, and we're not talking about prior approval. It's not gonna bring in that 3-week delay business, and I don't think it's an onerous requirement. So I'm in favor of the contracts over 1,000 should show up on the agenda. I could have a discussion as to whether it's weekly or monthly, but I think we should be able to look at those, and a lot of the things like the speakers' fees for the conventions and things like that we could be interested in and want to take a look at how these things are being handled could fall in that range. And so I would not want to be devoid of any information about those contracts. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that then, I mean, Mr. Meckler is indicating that something like that should be codified then and through the legislation, because we can do an amendment if people are, committee's in favor of that.
If the committee wants to make it a requirement.
Yeah.
Then I would, from a codified standpoint, I mean, unfortunately, I would put it in the code if it's gonna be a requirement. So that way, everybody understands what everybody's expectations are.
So something to the effect of purchases between $1,000 and $5,000 must appear in the Board of Control agenda? On the Board of Control agenda, something to that effect?
Something like that. I think if that's what the committee wants to do, we can help craft the language for the council meeting, just to have it included in the ordinance. I just want to make sure, I want to look back at what we required back in 2012, 2013 about what came to council.
Okay.
If that's something that the committee wants.
Okay, Mr. Gallagher has a comment.
I sat back and kind of chuckled. Maybe I've been around here too long. But some people up here aren't listening to what our workers are telling us. If you want to put more restrictions on this, fine. If your concern is, and I'm all for reporting, go to 0 and all the way up. You didn't have any concern from 0 to 499, which you'll be sitting here in the Board of Control for 18 hours. If there's going to be shenanigans, 0 to 99 is where it's at, 499 is where it's at. I'll accept reporting, reasonable reporting. But if you're going to alter my legislation, you're going to become sponsors. Because I've been through this before. So I'm not accepting, I'll pull it. You want to alter it with reporting, reasonable reporting, fine. Be specific, or I'll pull it. And I'm going to line up every division in this county with 10 of their workers, with 20 of their stories. And you're going to hear what I hear, and maybe I hear it because I'm around here and know more people. But this is good legislation. It has to happen. I have a short fuse on nitpicking. You're not worried 0 to 499. That's where you should be worried. So I'll accept it. Y'all become sponsors.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Well, in fairness to other committee members, I mean, I would have liked to have seen some more departments up here, if it's such a big concern, because I've not,
Then let's hold it. Then hold.
you know,
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I'll hold it. We'll pull it, deal with it.
yeah.
I don't want you uncomfortable.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
if we
Mr.
could,
Chairman, yeah.
if it's possible to come back for a second committee meeting on the item itself. And I'll make sure that those, other department heads are with
Yeah.
us.
Mr. Wondolowski?
If I may, I can't tell you, in the construction business, how many times you're working on a project and you may, a pipe fitter, for example, may come across, they're repiping a section of fire line, and there may be a valve needed, and that valve's over $500. Then the crew has to pull off for an extended period of time while this goes through a process. It is a waste of money. It is a waste of money. It's a waste of man hours. It's a waste of money. It's probably why you're not getting contractors to bid work here, okay? What if what if you give a contractor a project and then he has a change order of over 500? I can only imagine what you're doing, not only to yourselves, but to the people that you have working for you. If there are shenanigans going on, I'm sure somebody will get to the bottom of them, and you guys will deal with that. I don't believe that. And I can tell you from my standpoint, with my people, that's not happening. We're here to build and repair and retain these buildings in a condition that makes you all proud. Please do not pull the legislation. Please keep it on. Let's vote for this thing, and let's not create additional barriers that are going to prohibit people that are employed by you from doing the good work that they do. Please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wondolowski. Well, here's my thing, and I'll throw this back to the two Board of Control members, because that kind of what's been driving where I was coming from on this. Both Board of Control members, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they seem uncomfortable not having something listed moving forward. Is that such a big deal? I mean, Mr. Miller said that's 5 to 10 items a week. Is that such a big holdup? I didn't get the impression that was such a big deal. But yeah.
I don't think this amendment need to hold up the legislation. It could be done at the council meeting. The only question is whether people want to hear from the other departments, which is a totally separate issue. If you want to hear from the other departments, you should have another committee meeting. But if that's not a concern, you don't need to hold the legislation for the reporting amendment. If we can work out an amendment, we'll do it at the council. I'll work with the sponsor. If we
That's fine.
If we can't work out an amendment, well, we'll pass it without the amendment.
Listen, I'll take the word of the gentleman who spoke before us today, indicating that other department heads have indicated. I have no reason to doubt that you guys are making up that department heads need this stuff to move through. So what we'll do is we'll move this legislation forward, and we'll work with the sponsor to come up with a reasonable amendment, if an amendment at all, if we decide to do that, okay? I think everybody up here has good intentions, and I certainly understand Mr. Gallagher's concern about nitpicking and, undermining what the purpose of the legislation is. I do understand that.
Mr. Chairman, it's just, I have a frustration of the frustrations that our workers have. And honestly, I could line people up here and you'd be here all day. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're taking the word of somebody that we trust, that this is an issue. We have at times in this council, and you weren't here, would nitpick. And reporting's important. Justifying purchases is important. But I just wonder how important it is, as Mr. Wondolowski so eloquently stated, when you're pulling a crew off a project because of a $400 or $500 part, that's an entire crew. That's a day, that's 2 days, that's 3 days, or it could be 3 weeks.
Sure.
That's a lot of wasted money. Sure. So I appreciate reporting, and if we have reasonable requests for reporting, that's reasonable. But I don't want to hold this up and become more frustrated. I think this is very easy legislation to move forward on.
Okay, I appreciate it. Ms. Conwell had a comment.
Well, I just wanted to follow up and say, I agree with efficiencies. I'm for, I think Councilman Gallagher took it the wrong way. We do respect and want to provide a efficiency for Public Works as well as the other departments. It's just amazing that I sit over at HHS and I have never had a conversation with Walter and them about the issues. So I agree that you guys probably had a conversation. I want to have a conversation with all the HHS departments that will be able to utilize this. So I can look for a compromise. I'm just interested in oversight. Any dollar that goes out of this county, we should have some kind of mechanism where we can lay eyes on it. That is all I'm saying. And we can put forth an amendment as we move forward, as this legislation moves forward. So I think that's what me and Councilwoman Baker and Councilman Miller were saying, is that have no problem with efficiencies. We want to all save money. We're going to need it in this next biennial by all means, but we got elected to have oversight, or at least to have a mechanism to know where every dollar is spent. Okay.
Sure, and given the current climate, I think it's very reasonable to have some oversight. I don't think I'm going to apologize for that. Mr. Mackler, you got something?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add a couple things. One, this legislation will not change the thresholds that's in the travel policy. So in terms of conferences, travel, any type of that thing, that will still stay at the current thresholds. It varies from in-state, out-of-state, out-of-county thresholds, so those would remain the same. Two, will still require departments to do a public process for things between, I think, 1,000 and 50,000. So in terms of the bidding process, that won't change. They still have to go get bids. And three, in terms of the internal process of what happens, when a department does issue a DO or PO, it doesn't stop at the department level. Other departments, including OPD and fiscal, sees those. So that it's not just you have to take the department's word for it. There are other individual departments that oversee that and also approve it. So in terms of other eyes being on it, it's just not one user sitting at his or her computer and can go make that purchase. There
Right.
are other approvals there. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
the
I
body
appreciate
knew
that, and I think that'll be part of the discussion about any amendment, if any. Okay, I appreciate that. Ms. Baker?
Yes, and understanding the concerns, certainly I would be in support of the 1,000 threshold for oversight, 1,000 to 5,000. I'm just sitting in the chair of Board of Control, and the hours that it takes to prepare for that meeting, and then the questions that we ask, not typically from your department, but from other departments, as was given as an example of speaking arrangements and different events that are put on, and this different things that we should know about that are going on out there that that fall in between that 1,000 and 5,000. So if there was a mechanism for us, I would certainly consider supporting that, understanding the need. We're not adding any more work. We're just taking some of it away, but keeping in perhaps that threshold that exists today.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Miller?
This is an ordinance, not a resolution, and there's a long tradition that ordinance almost always go 3 readings. So I'm going to make a motion to move ordinance 2019-0003 to the full council for second reading, and this will give us plenty of time to work out an amendment to be brought forward at one of the next 2 council meetings.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second for moving this forward on second reading to council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The ayes have it. Okay, and we'll move on to, thank you.
Resolution number 2019-0059, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1500299 with Halley Industrial Park for lease of space located at 1890 East 40th Street, Cleveland.
Yes. Okay, if I could, yeah, barely. Okay. Okay, oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
Mike Chambers, John Myers, and Melanie Say here to present this item. We're asking for approval of this item for the $450,000. In the original lease agreement, it did indicate that, the county is responsible for operating costs. As those costs became, better known, because at one time, you can understand the building was vacant, and it went to partial, more and more people, and finally, it's getting, more capacity. The operating costs obviously have changed. The $450,000, and it goes back to 2017, is to go back and cover some of the operating charges that we had to pay in prior years to correct the record, and hopefully this 450 will, bring us to the end of the year. I will tell you this, that as this building gets more and more used, we're getting better numbers. So we will probably be coming back in the future as we finally get the final numbers and a good year under our belt of what the operating costs, and probably come back with a better and hopefully, I'll say, a final amendment, maybe later this year or early next year.
Okay, when is this lease supposed to run through? I see it.
Mr. Chairman, John Myers, on behalf of Public Works. It's a 10-year lease that started in June of 2015 with 2 5-year renewables.
I see. Okay, any questions from my colleagues? Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to Mr. Myers, is this a new lease for new space or the continuation of what's over there already?
Mr. Chairman, to the Councilwoman, this is the existing lease. The funds, we were under the lease which you authorized back in 2015. These funds were our legal obligation to pay. This is sort of a fiscal function of the amendment. We're not anticipating new expenses. This is sort of to encumber these funds to be in the best business practices of our fiscal arrangements, to recognize them and encumber them as part of the lease.
Okay, so it's nothing new. It's what we've had before. And the 450,000, it was that, what all does that cover? The leasing of, I'm trying to think of where the parking
I know that some of
space
the,
is. Is it behind the PNC?
Correct. Madam Chair, this is at 40th and Perkins. This is the county archives building, which includes the county archives as well as other public works functions, as well as the Board of Elections operations, and some other functions that is accomplished here. And these are the operating expenses associated with the building to get us through the next period.
and also, Mike Chambers again, some of the increases due to taxes, and once again, as that building became more occupied, obviously there's a lot more operating costs associated with it. And I think once it does reach full capacity, once again, we'll probably have to come back and address it again, or as taxes or anything were to change.
Okay, any further questions?
I just add my name to the legislation.
Okay, if we could add Ms. Conwell's name to legislation. And you're looking for this, I'm assuming since this is an ongoing lease, we want second reading suspension.
Appreciate that consideration.
Okay, I'll make that motion for second reading suspension. And we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Let's move on, second reading suspension. Madam Clerk, the next piece of legislation.
Resolution number 2019-00545, authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute and submit a loan application in the amount of $752,625 to Ohio Water Development Authority to finance a portion of the Bradford Road Relief Sewer and Pump Station Elimination Project.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Dave Marquardt from the Department of Public Works. This legislation is a request for approval to submit a loan application to the Ohio Water Development Authority to finance a portion of the Bradford Road Pump Station Elimination Project. The amount of the loan is $752,625. That loan amount was determined in consultation with the finance director of Brecksville, with a goal of maintaining a positive cash balance in the city's sewer account funds. If there are any further questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, and was this at the request of Brecksville then? Or is this a county?
Well, this is really the county
Okay.
working with Brecksville,
Working.
but it's the county.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues? No? Okay, seeing none. Let's see, this here it says, it's running through 12/31/19. Is that when this project will be completed or anticipated completion date?
Yes, I don't have that exact date, but
It says 10/22/2018 through 12/31/2019.
yes,
Okay,
that
so
would
that's
be
anticipated
the
date.
completion date.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Baker?
Related to that question, this contract is dated 10/22/18. This is now March. Is there a reason why we have not had this brought before us perhaps last year?
Well, the discussions about obtaining those funds were at the beginning of the project, but they aren't necessarily needed right at the beginning. So the application process was off just a little bit with respect to the project. But if we pass this at this point, we won't have any problems with funding the project. The funds will be in time to properly fund it.
If I may, has the project, I mean, what if this would have, I mean, this seems pretty straightforward, but what if there was a problem with this vote today? How would you have already been into the project and expensing
Yeah.
what needs to be paid?
Generally speaking, OWDA funding, we don't have problems receiving that.
Okay,
I don't recall of any times where we didn't get the funding when we needed it.
okay. And the timeline of the end of this year is enough time to finish this project?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm still kind of newer here. What is the Ohio Water Development Authority? What type of entity is that?
It's a state agency, and the intent is to give low-interest loans for water and sewer needs
Okay.
in the state.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and with that then, since we're well into this, again, I'm assuming we're looking at second reading suspension on this.
No, we have adequate time.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate it, but we don't have to
I
go.
wasn't sure if because the contract had the work had started, so, okay. Then we'll move this, if I could have a motion for
So moved.
second reading. We'll just move this on to second reading before the full council. And we have a motion and a second for second reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, the next piece of legislation.
Resolution number 2019-0057, making an award on requisition number 44223 to Katz Construction in the amount not to exceed $3,068,000.05 for resurfacing of Warrensville Center Road from Broadway Avenue to the Maple Heights North Corporation line in the cities of Bedford and Maple Heights.
Okay, and if you could state your name for the record.
Nicole English from Public Works. So we're asking for an award on Warrensville Center, a road resurfacing project. This project was actually programmed years ago when we were still doing 100% items. So, but because it had federal funding, the federal funding, was this far out. So the city does not have a share in it. There is federal funds in the amount of 73%. We went and got issue 1 to make up the difference because the price had increased from the time that we were awarded NOACA. So we have 13% issue 1 and 14% county. So that's lower than the 20% was anticipated. The engineer's estimate was just slightly above this amount. So this is about 0.2% under the engineer's estimate. We are awarding to the lowest bidder, and because it's federally funded, there's a 7% DBE goal that they are hitting.
Okay, so it's the lowest and best bidder, and you said it was 0.2% under engineer estimate?
Correct.
Okay, and then we, again, just some of these figures again, it's federally funded 73%, issue 1 13%, county 14%.
Correct.
Which is under the 20% threshold. Okay, questions from my colleagues on this? Pretty straightforward. Mr. Gallagher? No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
We would ask for a second reading suspension just so construction, if the
Okay.
snow ever goes away.
Okay,
could start sooner.
I'll make that motion for second reading suspension. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, could I have a second?
Second.
I'm like you, I'm like Putin up here. So, okay. So second reading suspension. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The ayes have it, and second reading suspension.
Been a long
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's, yeah. All
That was
right.
Deborah.
After this morning, I'm gonna break my Lenten promises. Okay, so, next resolution?
Resolution number 2019-0058, making an award on requisition number 44237 to Shermer Construction in the amount not to exceed $874,400 for replacement of Adele Lane Culvert and Westwood Lane Culvert over a creek to West Branch of Rocky River in the village of Olmsted Township.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Nicole English with Public Works again. So this is an award for 2 culvert replacements.
Okay.
The engineer's estimate was $1 million, so this came in under. 2 bids were received. This was an SBE set-aside project. So Shermer Construction is a local SBE that they're getting the project. And these are in the township, so they are the county's responsibility, which is why the county is paying all the funds.
Okay, questions or comments on this ordinance? Okay, what district is this? Is this Ms.
This
Baker's
is
or no?
5.
Oh, Gallagher, okay.
Gallagher.
All right, District 5. Okay, any questions, comments, nothing? Okay. And this, I see you're looking for second reading suspension on
Correct, just the
this?
same reason. If the weather does break, we'd like to have them out there starting.
Okay, I'll make that motion for second reading suspension. Okay, I have a second? I have a,
Through the chair
Oh, yeah,
to,
I'm sorry.
Ms. English, there's no dates or anything. This is just let
yeah, I don't see any dates in
that
there.
or the one
Well,
before.
typically on construction contracts, we don't put dates in the legislation.
Okay.
The estimated date, though, is starting April 1 and then completing by November 15th of this year. Should be a short, they're design build, so they need a little bit of time up front to design, but they should be able to get them constructed this year.
Okay. So I have a motion for second reading suspension. Could I have a second? Oh, we did have a second? Okay, I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second for second reading suspension. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that'll go forward on second reading suspension as well. Anything else, Madam Clerk? No, that's it. Is there anything else before the committee from council members? Okay, and with that, thank you. And Public Works Procurement Contracting Committee shall adjourn at 11:27 a.m.